Nothing says 4th of July, at least for the NASCAR Cup Series, like racing alongside the bricks of Indianapolis. Okay, it's kind of weird that we're not in Daytona this time of year. Nonetheless, one thing that remains the same is the Patriotic Paint Schemes, as there are quite a bit from this race and some of those that ran during the Coca Cola 600. So, with the same rules and guidelines as last time, we're going to tier rank the 2020 NASCAR Patriotic Paint Schemes and see which ones are the high standard and the others that are an act of treason against the US. Now, let's start out with a classic NASCAR car and sponsor, which is the Miller Lite Blue Deuce. Now, Brad Keselowski has driven this paint scheme since 2017, but he finally earned top tier success by winning this season's Coca Cola 600. And most certainly, if this is Miller Lite's final race, as they're not scheduled for any more events, this was a great way to go out. A lot of people think this car's lazy, but I really like the way the American flag stretches on the side of the car. It's simplistic, it fits with the Miller Lite to have the white on the front and the back, and is definitely one of the A-grade Miller Lite paint schemes, at least for the patriotic side. From Austin Dillon, we have a pair of red and white blue designs. The first is the Coca Cola Camaro that ended up racing during the 600. Now, I must say, Pepsi is by far the superior cola. But in terms of this paint job itself, it has an old school look which I think fits the image of Coke. The name itself has recognition to millions. The RCR designers themselves knew this, and that's why you get this great paint scheme. My only issue is the swoop on the side, but after that, definitely worth putting in the firecracker tier. The second paint scheme for Austin Dillon relies with this Dow patriotic design, making its debut during this weekend's Brickyard 400. Now last season they had the throwback to Dale Sr.'s 1996 car, and honestly I think this paint scheme's a little bit better. It's fresh, unique, and I really like how they incorporated silver into this design. And then the icing on the cake is it's going to have members of the military on the car, which is definitely cool and to represent and respect the guys who served our country. Looking at this car, the only issue is the white A-pillar, and that's the thing hindering it from being in the Patriotism on Wheels tier, but nonetheless, I really like this car. It is a great symbol of American pride. And speaking of American pride, just look at this awesome Kevin Harvick design that's racing during this weekend's race in Indianapolis. Now, Anheuser-Busch has done patriotic designs for Budweiser, but this is the first one under the Busch banner for Kevin Harvick at least. And looking at it, it is absolutely fantastic. You've got fireworks, a bald eagle on the side, and then you have the red and white stripes. It's just absolutely fantastic looking at it. And then you've got the slogan, Home of the Brave, on the rear bumper. I'm telling you, the St. Louis-based company, they put out some great paint schemes for Busch Beer, but this one has to be one of their greatest. So without a doubt, this one's going in the Patriotism on Wheels tier. Seriously, I can't think of anything that would make it any better. Also running this weekend is Ryan Newman's Oscar Mayer Ford. Now last season, they ran a car during the Coke 600. I thought it was okay. This season, it's back, where you have the Oscar Mayer orange on the front, and then in the middle you have the blue with the white stars, and then finishing it out, you have red and white stripes going down the back. Now, I have to say, it's better than last year's paint scheme, but I think it would have looked a lot better if they would have had the blue extend all the way to the front. I mean, they can keep the Oscar Mayer yellow banner and maybe add a bit more orange, but I just think the front is a little bit too much. I'll be a little bit lenient and put it in the status quo tier, but it could be a lot better. Tommy Baldwin Racing has made it back to the NASCAR Cup Series, and in one of their first races, they ran a patriotic paint scheme with J.J. Yaley. On the hood of his car was the Veterans Community Project, which is a non-profit organization that helps end homelessness for veterans. And looking at the paint scheme, really the only notable thing about this car is the United States flag on the side. But unlike the typical American flag, it's a black background and it's outlined in gray, and there is no special red, white, and blue on this car. Now, I'm going to be a bit lenient once again and put it in the status quo tier because this is a small team, but hopefully next year they come up with something a little bit better than this. Next up is Tyler Reddick for his first patriotic paint scheme in the NASCAR Cup Series. This number 8 Alsco Chevrolet Camaro ran during the 600, and screw it, I'm just gonna say it, this paint scheme is ugly. I mean, just look at it. You got the Alsco logo. It's very hard to read on this car, and it doesn't work well with the camo. And then you have the orange number on top, and I think it kills any vibe the designers were going with. Unfortunately, they could have done a lot better with this car, so I have to rank this one pretty low. For the third straight year, Aric Almirola has sported this black, red, and blue Smithfield look, with this year's getting the addition of more races, which included the Alsco 500 and this weekend's Brickyard 400. And much like Brett Keselowski's car, there really isn't a need to change it with every passing Memorial Day or 4th of July. It is a great car on its own, so I'm gonna put this one in the firecracker tier. It's definitely one of the higher standards, and this is one you're gonna remember for years to come. It's hard to believe, but in FedEx's near 2-decade sponsorship, there have rarely been any patriotic paint schemes for the delivery company. But guess what? For 3 races this year, we finally got one, and I wonder how awesome this is gonna look considering their previous history of great designs. Okay, I'll say this, I like the design as with the waves on the side and the stars, it could have worked really well if it was done right. But unfortunately, this wasn't done right as there's no red, there's no blue, and now there is white because of course that's the background of the traditional car. But guess what? Instead of, actually making a great paint scheme, they decided to go with the traditional colors of FedEx. And honestly, it completely ruins it for me. This does not look like an American car. It's just simply a mockbuster. And guess what? This is going in the active treason tier. There's a first for everything, but this car sucks. And as an American scheme, I hope this car never hits the track again. So after years of running the black Geico paint scheme, one of the greatest designs in recent memory, Germain Racing decided to change it up for the 2020 Coca Cola 600. Ty Dillon's number 13 this season took a bit of a simplistic look, and honestly, it's a downgrade, but it's not the worst thing I've seen. When I originally saw this car, I felt like it sucked, but seeing it under the lights, it definitely looked a lot better. But of course, it's not the awesome scheme for 2016, so I'm gonna put this one in the status quo tier. Now for one of the most intriguing patriotic designs honestly I've ever seen. Barstool Sports is finally getting into NASCAR sponsorship, and with Clint Boyer at Talladega, they decided to commemorate the United States of America winning back-to-back World War Championships as it's proclaimed on the hood. Now, say what you want on that take, whether it's kind of a cool play or whether it's a horrible take on glorifying war, but when you look at this car, it's simplistic, it looks nice and sleek. Now, I will say they shouldn't have screwed over the Dragon. That was such an awesome paint scheme. I think they should have saved this one for the Brickyard and then ran that one for Talladega. Now, as for this paint scheme, I'll put it in the firecracker tier. It's definitely unique, a little bit generic, but it's just enough to get into that second tier. It was a sentimental race for Brendan Poole as he had the name of SFC Nathan Chapman on the side of his car. And now, of course, with this one, you have the military green like most paint schemes, but what really makes this car stand out is definitely the yellow. You've got the yellow stripes going across the top of the car, and then you have the yellow side skirt, and it really makes this car stand out. Premium Motorsports, they don't have the greatest paint schemes, but this one's an exception. I'm gonna put this one in the firecracker tier. Well, would you look at that, Sunny D, they always have the most vibrant paint schemes, and now finally they're getting into patriotic designs. I wonder what this year's is gonna look like. Seriously, Roush designers, did you guys even try with this paint scheme? I mean, you think about it, Sunny D, they could have incorporated the orange and yellow really well with the American colors. Or they have other flavors like orange strawberry and fruit punch, which would have looked much better with a design such as the American flag. Without a doubt, Chris Buescher, Sunny D, this is definitely a low tier paint scheme, and it's unfortunate considering the history of Sunny D's designs. So now we have the traditional Kyle Busch M&Ms patriotic car. This scheme has had a lot of success. It won the 2018 Coca Cola 600 and has pretty much ran every race, and then I think it also ran the Real Heroes 400 at Darlington. Unfortunately, compared to previous M&M patriotic designs, honestly, this one's kind of generic. I mean, you just look at the early 2000s, even some of the earlier Kyle Busch paint schemes, they were can't miss it, you were excited to see. I mean, it's simplistic, but with M&Ms, I wish they'd switch it up, and honestly, I gotta put this one in the status quo tier. Also returning to the track this weekend is Kyle Busch's Skittles America Mix Toyota Camry. Now, this car raced previously at Talladega in 2017 and the previous races at Chicago, which of course, one of those was the infamous slide job moment during the 2018 race. And unlike the M&M's paint scheme, this car utilizes its full potential. I mean, you just look at it, you have the blue on the top, then you have the American flag stretching across the side. And unlike the Sunny D car, you have the Skittles branding incorporating really well with making a very good red, white, and blue paint scheme. Seriously, I can't think of how you can make this any better, and it's definitely going to be one of the most recognized patriotic paint schemes of the late 2010s, early 2000s. And guess what? This is going alongside Kevin Harvick in the Patriotism on Wheels tier. For the second year in a row, Martin Truex Jr. ran this USO Bass Pro Shops paint scheme during the Charlotte 600. But this year, it was a little bit of a twist, as you've got an eagle right alongside the number of the car pointing out towards the front. Now, I know this car got a lot of criticism for this, but I think it works really well with the design, and it fits very well with the number, of course. The only thing bad about this car is there's a bit of a black stripe kind of on the side, which doesn't really work. But after that, I wish they ran this car more, and this is definitely going in the firecracker tier. This car was just unveiled as Martin Truex Jr. will run an auto owner's patriotic design for this weekend's race. Getting a better look at this paint scheme, you have the light blue of auto owners, which fades into the darker blue. And then you have a white stripe on the side, which then indicates the red, which isn't a traditional color for auto owners, which is really good and unique for this paint scheme. And then for the background, you've got some stars and stripes if you glance really close. Now, I must say, most of the time, incorporating brand colors with the USA design don't work, but for auto owners, it works really, really well. This is an idea I haven't seen before, and this is a really creative idea, so this one's going to rank really high on the list. Besides William Byron channeling his inner Star-Lord and derailing the entire night for Hendrick Motorsports, this is one of the greatest patriotic paint schemes I've seen William Byron race in his short career. It's safe to say Liberty U got past the monstrosity that was the 2018 scheme. And this time you've got stars all across the front, and then you've got red and white stripes on the side. It just looks absolutely fantastic. My only gripe with this car is, guess what? It's a 24 car. Put yellow numbers on it. But after that, this car screams America, and this is definitely in the firecracker tier as one of the greatest paint schemes here in the 2020 season. Now for LaJoie, there have been 3 paint schemes this season that have symbolized America for the small team. The first one is this Superior Logistics Services car that ran during the 600. When I look at this car, the main standout element is the white, which is honestly kind of boring. And then when you look at it, there's not really much blue on this car, which I think really hurts it. I mean, the only standout element that I really like about this car is the red stripes going down the side. But after that, this is not a very good car. I've got to put this one towards the lower end of the spectrum. But fortunately, a week later, LaJoie ran this paint scheme during a 500-lap endurance fest at Bristol. And the cool thing about this car is the sponsor enlisted 9. If you guys don't know, they are an active duty own lifestyle brand, which was founded in 2013 by 2 senior NCOs and a military spouse. And their desire is to express their love for the armed forces, country, and fighting, but also providing an affordable high-quality product in doing so. It's cool to get on board for that aspect, but the paint scheme is also really cool as well, as it is inspired by World War II ace Bud Anderson's P-51 Mustang. And now looking at how they modeled off of that plane, there are 2 issues unfortunately I found with this car. The first issue is that the numbers should be in black, and then the top should probably be in silver to accurately represent the real thing. But I like the idea behind this. It was definitely cool to see on the track, and I'm going to put this one on the firecracker tier besides its couple flaws. And then the third one has sparked a little bit of controversy as of late, as a super PAC has decided to sponsor LaJoie for 9 races. In return, they will be displaying the Trump 2020 campaign on the hood of his car. Now, considering society today, I won't say anything regarding politics or the president. After all, I'd probably end up getting canceled, and I made it this far, I've got 15,000 subscribers. I'd like to not lose all that in one instant. But in terms of the sponsorship, I think it's cool to see Go Fast get some money, and it's cool to see them get a consistent paint scheme on their car. Now, as for the paint scheme, honestly, it could be a lot better. And considering the whole political spectrum, if I go either way, I'm probably getting canceled, so guess what? I'm going to put this one in the status quo tier. Meanwhile, Michael McDowell has had 2 patriotic paint schemes this year. One is the traditional Loves Camo paint scheme that's ran the last couple years. I definitely think it's an interesting look. Not the greatest, but I really like it. It's one of the better camo designs compared to some of the other ones like the Tyler Reddick and Austin Dillon cars. So definitely, I'm putting that one in the firecracker tier. And then you have the one he's running this weekend at the Brickyard 400. Now, looking at this car, you've got the reddish orange number, and then you have the stars on the side, which is kind of cool. But my main problem with this car is it just looks too busy. Just looking at the side, there's a little bit too much going on. And then, honestly, the thing that kills it is the white A-pillar and then the roof. So, unfortunately, this one's definitely in the bottom tier of patriotic paint schemes. But now let's get back to a great paint scheme, which was illustrated by Ryan Preece during the 600. Scott Products, they've been a sponsor for a while, but I don't really remember them having many patriotic paint schemes over the years. But with this paint scheme, they really did a great job incorporating the red, white, and blue, and also fitting the company colors as well. My only problem with this car is the blue kind of just abruptly ends before it gets to the end of the car. And that's definitely going to hurt it a little bit, but it's definitely one of the top tier paint schemes. I wish they would have ran it more often, and hopefully they do in the near future. So last season, the US Air Force decided to debut the Warthog paint scheme in replace of the traditional blue lightning design we've seen in recent memory. Now, it doesn't have the traditional Air Force blue anymore, but it's such a fantastic paint scheme in its own right. You think of the US Air Force as aviation, aircraft, all that stuff. And definitely with this paint scheme, it definitely looks like a fighter jet attacking enemies and fighting to defend the United States of America. Just look at the front of the car, it's got teeth and everything. This is such a violent, mean look, and honestly I can't think of it any better. So I know, all the Bubba Wallace haters are probably going to start disliking this video now, but guess what? This number 43 car is going in the Patriotism on Wheels tier, the 3rd in this installment. So, I was doing research for this video, and I didn't even think of Ricky Stenhouse Jr. of having a patriotic paint scheme. But then, looking at his JTG Camaro that he ran during the 600, it turns out, yes, this is a patriotic scheme. If you look closely, you've got some stars and stripes along the light blue, and then you have a red stripe outlined in white going down the side until it curves into the white. And now, I'm gonna say this. This has to be one of the laziest patriotic paint schemes I've ever seen. Seriously, this looks exactly like his 2020 paint scheme with a few tweaks here and there. And what's even remarkable is, considering the 2019 scheme was such an awesome design. Honestly, if you're Kroger and you're looking at these two cars, you have to feel embarrassed about how these different paint schemes went. Most certainly, I've got to put this one in the active treason tier. There is absolutely nothing. It's a very lazy attempt at a patriotic scheme. Seriously, you guys can do a lot better. Most certainly, Jimmie Johnson fans would love to forget this paint scheme ever existed. Just think about it. He went from nearly winning the Coca Cola 600 to getting DQ'd in post-race, and then losing all of his points and continuing the misery of being a Jimmie Johnson fan the past couple years. But I gotta say this, Ally, they've had some terrible paint schemes since they became a NASCAR sponsor. But this paint scheme is probably one of their better designs. Actually, it definitely is. I like what they did with the Ally logo on the 48. They stole the same font and everything, but it's illustrated to look like it's on the side of a tank or fighter jet. It looks sleek, edgy, and then you have the matte green color, which just absolutely makes this one of the better paint schemes of this class. So I'm going to put this one in the firecracker tier. Could be a tad bit better, but this is definitely one of the better Ally paint schemes, and it's definitely better than whatever the hell last year's was. The AGRI Supply Company Ford Mustang has blue, and it also has a bit of red, and it looks like a grayish color as well. Now, I'm sure a lot of people raved about this paint scheme, and I'm gonna be honest, I'm not buying the hype on this car. I mean, it just looks kinda generic. I feel like I've seen it, and I really don't like the ugly bluish looking gray on the back of the car. Unfortunately for Rickware Racing, their only car on this list is going to rank in the trenches. Alrighty guys, let's get to the Chevy Goods Almirola Bowman the Showman. This car did really good in the 600, winning a couple stages and was bound for a top 10 finish. Until, of course, Hendrick Motorsports had that colossal collapse in the final 2.5 laps of the race. But just looking at this car, this screams freedom, independence, you name it. You've got dark blue as the background, and then you have red that spikes down the side. You've got white, and then of course a mix of blue as well. And another thing I find cool about this is Alex Bowman actually helped design this paint scheme. This was a common trend by Dale Earnhardt Jr. when he drove for the 88, as he had a great presence in how the car looked on the racetrack. That's just another reason for people to go for Alex Bowman going forward. And I have to say this, Alex Bowman did a fantastic job of designing this paint scheme. So you know what? I'm going to put this one in the Patriotism on Wheels tier. Such an awesome paint scheme, and I wish they would have ran it during the Brickyard 400. Seriously, Hendrick, you couldn't carry over the Charlotte paint schemes to Indy, at least one. And now, rounding it out is probably the most ironic patriotic design I've ever seen. The reasoning why it's a bit sketchy is Toyota was obviously created in Japan and Daniel Suarez was born in Mexico. So this car pretty much represents the salad bowl of different ideas coming into the United States and mixing together to form this culture. And looking at this car, I really like this simplistic look. You've got the white background, you've got the blue fading into the red. The only thing I don't like about this car is the number could be a different color. I think it would stand out a lot, especially with there being a lot of red already on this car. But to wrap up the 2020 edition of the Patriotic tier ranking, this one is going to go in the firecracker tier. This car carries the banner of America very well, and hopefully in the future we can see more awesome gems like this. So anyways, this is NRF signing out, and just remember, life's a beach and then you drive.